This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development consultants who are struggling with steady lead flow, consistent bottom line revenue, and scalability so they can finally have healthy margins, make more strategic decisions, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral-based growth. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead generation that create sustainable revenue and year-over-year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and I am so excited to be here with you guys today. Today, I am joined by my good friend that I recently met, but we are good friends now, Aaron Alpeter. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Guys, let me take a second to introduce this powerhouse of a man. I met him recently, and I was just really amazed and impressed with his depth of knowledge and his breadth of knowledge and experience as well, and the impact that he's making in the world and how he's doing it. So I'm really excited to have him dive into that. Aaron helps founders build businesses worth buying. He's a supply chain expert who got started at Unilever and was an executive at companies like Public Contacts, Flex Company, and Mir. He has built a portfolio of supply chain tech companies, including ISBA, Sourcify, and Slotted. He's also the host of Build a Business Worth Buying and co-host of E-commerce on Tap. He has a weekly LinkedIn newsletter called Assembly Required. That's very clever, by the way, where he talks about all things geopolitics and supply chain. I'm sure you're having a fun time right now with like all the tariffs and stuff like that. I'm sure it's a party. Collectively, he's helped founders achieve 1.5 billion in exits and create another 2.1 billion in investor value. Guys, we have such a heavy hitter with us. Give a huge round of applause. Again, Aaron, welcome to the Marketing Matrix.
Thank you so much. It sounds more impressive than it actually is. My introduction, at least.
Most introductions feel that way. Whenever someone reads mine, I'm just like, oh wow, dang! Like I shouldn't have people
What's
read that too often. Yeah, who are they? Is that me? So for people that don't know you, give us a little bit of your background. Like how did you what's your journey? How did you get started to help people get to the place of exiting and creating massive value?
Yeah, so I have loved supply chain since before I knew what it was. When I transferred to Ohio State and got into the business school and said, okay, what's your hardest major? Just put me in that one. And if I like it, cool. If not, I'll transfer out of it. And that happened to be logistics. And as soon as I figured out like, oh, wow, you could have a career around factories and inventory and forecasting and transportation and all of this other interesting things that were going on, I was hooked. And so to the point, like, every time we go visit a new city or we go somewhere, if there is a factory that gives a tour, my wife doesn't even say anything more. It goes on the agenda. She's like, yeah, of course you want to go see how they make, boots, or of course you want to see how they, brew this thing. And so I'm just kind of a nutcase that way. After school, I was able to work at Unilever. It was in a rotational program and just got a fantastic education in what big companies look like at scale. And so I worked in the Lipton tea factory for about a year and a half. Could tell you more about tea than most people want to know. I led import export for North America. I did just a lot of really cool stuff and honestly thought I was going to be at Unilever for about 30 years. But there was this like longing and this nagging that I wanted to get into e-commerce. And Unilever is fantastic at so many things, but they're more of a full pallet to Walmart type company as opposed to a D2C powerhouse. And so I made the difficult decision to start consulting, getting into startups, and just immediately fell in love with how much of an impact I could make because this training, this understanding I had from supply chain was something that was kind of rare. When you work with founders who have a financial background or a marketing background, they're really good at dreaming and understanding these things. But being able to take those concepts and put them into reality was just a match made in heaven. And I just love working with founders. I love helping them see these dreams. It sounds hokey, but I love seeing people make the impact that they went out and did because starting a business is hard and you should be rewarded for it.
I love that. And I love, by the way, something we have in common. I love getting like how this is made tours as well. Like even like on a small scale, like one of my favorite tours I've ever been on was a vanilla farm in Hawaii, and like how vanilla is grown and propagated and produced. And at the end of the tour, they had amazing samples of foods that had their vanilla. It really was amazing. So I'm the same. If there's a tour specifically that is in regards to what is natively grown in the place or produced in the place, like I'm all about that as well.
100%. You need to go to Costa Rica and do a cacao farm.
That's on my list. It's absolutely on my list.
I said it was mind blowing because we went through there and it was the exact same plant. And they said, and they made chocolate bars. They said this chocolate bar was this cacao plant was growing next to a fruit tree and it tasted fruity. This tree was near a fire and it tastes smoky. This tree was in the sun. This tree was in the shade. And so despite it being, 60% cacao and the exact same formulation, the exact same person making it, the differences in color and texture and taste was just amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, like as soon as this episode's over, I gotta book a ticket. It's on my list of things to do, but you like triple sold me on that one. So good. Yeah, I love how you are passionate about the startup. One of the very first companies that I worked with was a clothing brand. And when I first started working with them, they were doing like 150 grand a year. And they were doing all of their supply and inventory out of their basement. And then fast forward 2.5 years later, we grew the business to 8 figures using Facebook ads predominantly. And they went from like having multiple semis coming into their neighborhood every week and getting massive complaints from neighbors and HOAs to finally moving out of their basement into a warehouse and having a big facility and growing the business. But one of the biggest things that, I was just like, I'll bring you the customers all day. But in terms of like cash flow and supply chain and how to manage materials and timelines for orders and promotion schedules, like it was like way beyond me. And I'm sure that's where you're just like, you want to get your hands dirty into stuff like that. So anyway, I really appreciate your skill set because people like you that helps those companies continue to be able to scale because growth for especially physical products are really tough because you can break the business very easily because of the difficulty of getting products and components into production. So anyway, that's just like my small understanding and experience. I'm just really grateful for what you do because it's necessary.
I appreciate it. I mean, there's this great dance that happens in a scaling company where I always tell marketing, try to break the business and I'm not going to let you. And so whether it is, I remember we were running the supply chain for Mirror during COVID, right? And so connected fitness, going from, all right, we're selling a couple dozen a day, that's cool, to suddenly we're selling 1,000 a day, right? And just everybody's stuck in, they can't do things. And so how do you scale production, work fair all the delivery stuff, take cost out, while the world's shutting down. And so that was, I don't know if I would want to go back and relive that experience, but it was certainly one where you look back and like, wow, we did a lot of really interesting stuff in a short period of time. And it definitely resonates with what you're saying.
I love that. So educate me just on for a second here, like how does supply chain relate directly to like valuations and exit strategies? Because I don't think I've made that connection in my mind. Like I've been more on the multiples and thinking of the revenues and on the systems in regards to client acquisition and that side. So like how does supply chain fit into that? Really, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And really the niche that we've carved out is we work with founders and we help them build something that somebody else wants to buy. We help them exit and then we help those acquirers integrate it. A quick story illustrates this well, is I was talking with a founder earlier this year who had exited their business 2 years ago. And they, became friends during the due diligence process. And he was talking with the person who led the deal on the acquirer side and said, hey, what was it like doing due diligence? What was scary? What was good and stuff like that? And what this acquirer told him in confidence and as friends really struck him to the core. And what he said was, we loved your brand. We loved your growth, but your supply chain was an absolute mess. And had it been in better situation, we would have paid a lot more for your business. And just like straight out said the quiet part out loud. And so whether it be you don't have the right quality protocols in place, you don't have the right contracts in place, you aren't in a situation where you know what you're doing and you're repeatable. Because again, you think about this, a acquirer wants to buy something that is repeatable and it has the processes that work. And when they give you an LOI, that is the high water mark of the deal, right? If they say, I'm going to give you $1 billion, the price never goes above $1 billion. It always comes below. And so oftentimes when you're looking at operations, you're doing a due diligence, you're finding those skeletons and you're taking stuff off that top, right? And so what we do is we do that reverse due diligence. We basically say, look, there's three things that you need in order to have an exit. The first is you need to be profitable, right? So let's see if we can fix your EBITDA margins to be where they need to be for an exit. The second thing is you need to have a unique capability. So what is it about your formulation, your IP, your supply relationships, your distribution networks that is something that's unique that an acquirer will want? And then third, what's the meat on the bone? What is it that the acquirer is going to look at and say, wow, you guys haven't gone into Europe yet? I have this fantastic distribution network. I can put you in right now and I can double the size of your business in 18 months. I'm going to pay a lot more for your business right now without you having to do the work to actually be in Europe.
Interesting. Interesting. That's really, really cool. I love that so much. Well, and I love how you also mentioned like it seems like it's like this tension which I felt with this company that I described earlier to you on like the marketing side is it's like the supply chain operations, you're like marketing, just try to break it. Like and please break it so that we can become more efficient and become better on the production and delivery side so that the whole business rises all together. Is that kind of like how the relationship works or
It is. It's more about supply chain being two steps ahead of marketing, right? Because the thing about supply chain is if you're fighting a fire today, you probably made a mistake 6 months ago, right? And so much of this is just seeing where we're going, skating to where the puck is, versus where it is, or where it's going to be versus where it is, and that's really the game. And so I want marketing to try to break it because I know I've already anticipated, and I have redundancies and I have things I can turn on that allow them to do different things, right? It's not about saying I have 2 years worth of inventory, go sell it. It's about, no, I've built the reactivity, I've built the machine in place so that not only can we make it, but we can do it in a cash efficient manner. Because the key thing is like taking costs out of the supply chain. That is more fuel that you can give to marketing, which makes this virtual cycle go faster.
that's really interesting. I love that. So with the companies that you consult with, do you purely come in as like the supply chain consultant or like do you look at the marketing side as well to like give suggestions over there or like how does it what's your scope essentially when you come into a company?
Yeah, usually we just say anything in the physical world is what we'll look at. So that could be factory, that could be fulfillment, that could be shipping, that could be your operational tech stack, it could be people, right? Figuring out how do you automate certain parts of your business, whether it be, you know, tactical implications of AI or things like that. Because we've been around so much, we can tell you what the financials probably should look like, and we can give you an opinion on what we're seeing elsewhere from a marketing point of view. But there are other people who are way more qualified for that. And usually what we'll do is say, hey, you've got a marketing question. I'll share what I know. But actually the expert that I'm going to go ask is Frank over here. Why don't I connect you to Frank and let you guys go from there?
Yeah, no, that's cool. That totally makes sense. So what are you looking for in a company that would like be a good fit for you? Like what are you like what are your key either KPIs or metrics or holes that you're looking for that's like, yeah, like they need someone like the ISBA group to come in and that is the consulting arm, right?
Yeah, so we've got it's a little bit confusing because the companies have grown and we've added and split and things like that. But we've got ISBA, which is the consulting group. We've got Sourcify, which does sourcing. So we've got thousands of factories across a couple dozen countries. And then we've got Slotted, which is a piece of infrastructure, tech infrastructure that helps you build and normalize fulfillment center RFPs. So you don't have to hire a consultant. You can kind of go through there and do those things. But they're all owned by the ISBA group as like a holding company piece view. But in terms of like the right fit for us, because we're so broad in the business models and the offerings that we have, there really isn't a company that we couldn't help with something. And so for us, we look at this more from the perspective of maybe a company is a better fit for Sourcify than for ISBA. But for us, we're very selective about who we work with. And it really comes down to who's the team, who's the founder that we're talking to. We want to be with people who want to build something amazing, right? And, from an ISBA point of view, this is very much a do with you sort of brand. And so we want to be there and to be a thought partner for you, to be there to bounce ideas off of. We need somebody who's willing to understand that even if they're outsourcing the work, they're not outsourcing their responsibility. And so we want to educate them and help them understand what decisions are the right thing for them. Sourcify, on the other hand, is more of a do for you type of offering. And so if you're like, hey, I just don't want to worry about it, you guys got it. Just take care of it. That's where those things are different. But ultimately, if it's good people, we want to find a way to work with them.
Yeah, I love that. Is it pretty common for companies to work with you that use all three of those arms that you offer?
Would say eventually, yes. I mean, I think that Sourcify tends to skew more for like pre-revenue to $20 million brands. Really, they're trying to figure out that product market fit. They need to be extremely lean and maybe they haven't built out their internal ops team. Whereas ISBA is really there to take you from, 10 to 500 million in revenue. And so a lot of what we'll do is we'll say, hey, you need to have a supply chain. We can fill that role temporarily, but let's go out and we're going to source in our network and find people and do the interviews for you. And we're going to build a team for you and then like hand it back. Right. So that's the idea there.
So how do people find you at this point? Like, what are your outreach strategies?
Yeah, this is something that we are always learning from. And so I think this podcast is a good place to get some good tips on. Most of our lead inbounds come from referrals, and they come from clients that we've worked with, partners that we work closely with, people who find us, things like that. And so we are getting better at cold email, outreach, podcasts, conferences, things like that. And I would say that, our journey from like a biz dev perspective has been one where we're doing all the things that you quote unquote should be doing, but we are probably not doing it in the best form that we have been. And so it's kind of similar to if you were lifting weights. The goal is not to move the weight. The goal is to engage certain muscles and to go up or down and to do things with the proper form. I think that's been the evolution that we've been on this year is how do we do the things that we've been doing that people would say, yeah, you should do that, but do it with the right form so it's integrated, it's thoughtful.
I love that. Yeah, and it's so important, right? I think it's very easy to get lost in like all of the should do's and the noise that you're creating. But how do you create the noise in a specific way that generates interest in the conversations that you need to have that ultimately provides the business? So I love that that's your focus of not just like being busy with getting content out there, but like how do we specifically create our content so that it's creates a direct conversation with the person that we want so that we can offer their help and build a network in the process. I love that. So good. So are there many groups out there like you? Like I've never met anyone that's like supply chain consulting. Like my question I was going to ask you is like, what do you do differently than most in your industry? But I guess my first question is like, are there people like you out there? And if so, like what do you do differently than
Yeah.
people that are in the
Th-
supply
there are
chain
a lot
consulting
of
space?
there are a lot of really smart supply chain people out there, and it is very easy to become a consultant. You just have to have somebody who's willing to pay you. And so I would say that there are a lot of 1, 2, 3 person shops out there that are great, right? And they do really good work and have a different thing there. There are a few that are a little bit bigger, right? Kind of like where we are. And I would say that where we are different is in a couple ways. The first is that we focus specifically on doing things that lead to enterprise value creation. And so we don't want to sell a project just because it's a billable hour thing and we could do it. But in fact, a lot of what we'll do is we will talk to clients and say, hey, yeah, I know you think that you should move to an ERP because your future acquirer is on NetSuite and that's what you want. But actually, the right thing is to do the diligence on who you would move to, not do the work, because if you do get acquired, they're going to move you onto their instance of NetSuite anyways. And so we kind of talk them out of spending money on consulting projects that way. So we're very, very much focused on working with serious founders who want to build something that they want to exit. And that could be a sale or it could just be stepping back and having a good lifestyle business. That's the first one. The second piece is it's difficult to find somebody with the breadth of capability and data that we have when you look at all three businesses together. And so we have an enormous amount of information insight into what the fulfillment market is doing. Last year we placed about $150 million worth of fulfillment contracts with fulfillment partners that are out there. And so we've worked with really big brands. We've worked with really small brands. We can tell you, fulfillment center A is really good for 1, 2, and 3, but fulfillment center B is better for X, Y, and Z. And so we've got this kind of consistent offering around data that I think is really separated for us.
That. See, I had a question that came up for me when you were talking about the first point. Is your goal to like are you wanting to grow the ISBA group and eventually like sell yourself? Or what's the big plan? Like are you wanting to sell or are you like in your deals, and it's okay and I totally understand if you can't
That's
mention
good.
this, but like are you structuring that you get a percentage of the deal when they sell and you're looking for upsides that way? Like I'm curious, like what's the big goal you're going after here?
Yeah, I think it is so businesses are bought, they're not sold, right? And so I think this is one of the things we tell our clients, this is some of the dog food that we eat ourselves, is we want to build something that somebody else may want to buy someday. That doesn't mean we are planning on selling, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to sell. But I want to build something that has enough staying power, enough cachet, enough of a distinctive value that if we hold it forever and we pay healthy dividends out to the team member, that's awesome. But if somebody comes through and says, hey, this is really great, we'd like to tuck it into this other thing, great, let's do that. And we can pay out the proceeds to the team. And so we're really focused on building process and processes as opposed to anything that's dependent on, say, a founder. But that's a big deal there. When it comes to working with these brands, I think that was kind of your question of how do we structure things. Typically, it's a straight cash consulting point of view. There are opportunities where maybe we want to be able to invest or have a warrant or things like that. But for most part, we just say, hey, like we're going to be here. We're going to go along with you, but we would be open to the right equity deals with those kind of companies.
That's fantastic. I love how it seems like you found this really amazing balance between having systems, but also being custom and like what do they need, which I think is a difficult balance to have. Has that been a challenge for you, or?
Yeah, I think it would, in some ways, it would be much easier if we had a rinse and repeat playbook and we said, hey, here's what you do. And we just kind of focus on doing that thing. And maybe we'll do that at some point. But for us, particularly on the ISBA side, we are working with bigger companies. And so there are principles that are consistent between Church and Dwight and Unilever, but they're going to approach things very differently. And so our approach needs to be different for those companies as they're thinking about integrating different acquisitions and things like that. Yeah, I kind of told the team at the beginning of the year that the goal is really to put it all together in 2025 and into 2026. So again, we're doing all the things that an outsider would say, this is how we do it. But we want to be tighter in the data that we share between the companies. We want to be tighter in the consumer journeys and how we're outreaching and how we're doing these things. I think in the past, we've had too many silos where not only just one entity will do something different from another one, which I think is fine and we'll continue to do that, but it's also been people in the same entity doing different things and not knowing that they were both reaching out to the same person or they were both doing these things that we could coordinate a little bit better. And so that's really what we're focused on is for the first 8 years of the business, I was primarily consulting and delivering the work. And really for the last couple of months, I've been able to focus on the business. And so that's been a great opportunity. And who knows, sometime soon, maybe I'll go in and pick up another Fortune 500 client here and that'll keep me busy for a while. But having a moment to really focus explicitly on the business has been a really rewarding thing.
Was it challenging to like let go of control and some processes that you were more involved in? Like, what was that process like for you?
I think it was liberating. So I've been really lucky to surround ourselves with some fantastic team members. And so we've got very strong leadership for each of the businesses. And, you know, I'm very explicit about saying, okay, we're talking about something. As the GM of this business, this is your call. I'll give you my opinion, but this is your call. I'll support you, whatever you think. Right. And so I think that kind of taking those markers and letting people know like, oh no, I really do own this. Right. And there are some cases where I'll come to them and say, hey, I'd like to do this. It's going to cost this amount of money from your group. Do you want to do it? And I have to influence them as opposed to just saying, hey, yeah, we're doing this sort of thing. So it's been a liberating thing to kind of build the processes, to let other people step into them and make them their own. And I think that's really, a good microcosm of what we try to do when we work with clients as well.
Yeah, I love that. So like some of the things that you've been able to like, I love how you said like now I'm able to work on the business. Like what are some of the projects that you have been working on that my guess have probably been on your list of to-dos, maybe even for years?
Gosh, yes. It's interesting. My wife is a marketer and her original degree was in supply chain, then she got an MBA in marketing. And so she can speak my kind of nerd, but then there'll be times where, we will go in and she'll talk about, tone and voice archetypes and different ideas around positioning and things like that. And so I have been able to learn and understand and appreciate these aspects a lot more. And so I've been taking a lot of kind of first principle approach to, how do we want ISBA to come across, right? Should our emails be really large and lengthy and kind of look at us, or should they be a little bit more reserved and really hold the client up as the hero? And so we've been doing some of those foundational, fundamental things that we've looked at. But then also because I am a supply chain person, I'm very process oriented. And so I could show you, we have this Miro board, which I think gave my team a heart attack the first time we showed them. But it was like, okay, here are the 12 different ways that we acquire customers or we have acquired customers. Let's walk through the process for each one of them and how does it all funnel into the last thing? And so I've been able to map out the business in great detail. And now we're in the process of adding in AI, adding in automations, in order to make it so it's not dependent on any one person doing it. And these things that we want to happen just happen.
I love that. I love that. So let's go there. Like, how is AI impacting your business in terms of like your own business development, and then also like how you're changing your processes and how you work with clients as well?
Yeah. I think like generally speaking, there's a right way and a wrong way to do AI. And we published a white paper a couple months ago that is basically just the future's not AI, it's you and I is the basic idea. And the thought is that the wrong way to use AI is to just use ChatGPT to write everything. Right? Someone says I need to write LinkedIn posts. Great. Here's a million ChatGPT posts about that. Somebody says I need a newsletter. Great. Here you go. And that sort of stuff maybe worked for a month and a half when ChatGPT just came out, but now people see through it. And you can tell almost instantly, as if it's a second sense, that something was not written by a human or was not edited by a human versus not. So I'm not saying that, we need typewriters and write things out. You can use AI to do these things, but it needs to be in your authentic voice. And that comes into maybe how you're prompting it or how you're doing those sorts of things. But the real philosophy that we use when it comes to AI in our own business or AI with our clients' businesses is we first try to map out what is the human process that we would want to have happen. What's the ideal state? And so that's where, my big mural map comes into is just, guys, here's what I think should happen. Let's debate it. And does this seem like a good flow or not? Okay. If yes, then what we do is we walk through an ECRS method, which is I borrow this from a factory. It stands for eliminate, combine, rearrange, and simplify. And so what you do is you walk through every manual task that you just created and say, do I need to do this? Yes or no? If yes, then you keep it. If no, you kill it. Then you go through and say, okay, if I'm doing this step over here and this step over here, can I combine them into some other way so that rather than having two AI agents doing something, I have one AI agent doing multiple things. Then you can say, okay, do I rearrange this or reassign it? Can I outsource this piece? Do I put an AI agent onto that, or do I combine different steps? And then you kind of walk through this and say, okay, how do I make this as simple as possible? And so we take the structured approach of, AI is good, but it's really just uh, a predictor. It's an autocomplete is what people will say. And what we want to do is we want to map out the actual human process that you want to have happen, and then figure out where can AI do that piece of it really, really well, and where do you need people with insight and foresight to be stepped in and look in. So that's how we don't want to automate away everything. We want to put AI on as like armor or not an Iron Man suit, so to speak.
I love that. So smart. So, and again, so eliminate, combine, rearrange, and what was
Simplify.
simplify. And the S was the last one.
Yep, simplify. So, and I kind of mix things up there, but so you go through any manual process, you just say, can I kill the manual process? Think about all the reports that you do. Think about, all of the data hygiene that you're doing for your CRM. That's stuff that you're like, I could kill it, or I probably need to keep it, right? Then it's about combining those steps so that, if I'm creating one report on a Monday and another similar report on a Tuesday, can I just make one report? It's that simple. And then you say, okay, can I reassign it? Can I give it to somebody else? Can I delegate it away to someone else on the team? Can I hire an agency or an outsourced partner to do that? Maybe there's someone overseas that can take care of it. And if you can't do those things, then you're going to simplify. And that's usually where AI comes to bear. But you only start automating things after you've taken all of the other manual processes into a really coherent thing that is worth automating.
I love that. So good. So smart. I have a very, very important question for you. Do you dream in spreadsheets and SOPs?
I actually don't dream a whole lot. So I just kind of like, I don't know, I think I just turn off and then that's it. Or maybe I'm living in like, we watched Severance recently. So maybe I'm living in like that sort of world. But no, I mean, but when I'm on, like, it's hard to turn my brain off. And so I would say I think in SOPs, I think in processes. And I think one of the things that I've developed and been fortunate to figure out is just the interactions we did between different things. And so, if we are thinking about this particular marketing campaign over here, how does that come back to, all right, we need to do this work on this voice element. Okay, we need to go back and update these other pieces. And, there's just kind of a spaghetti web's worth of conversations in my mind that kind of lay out, here's what I need to do today versus tomorrow versus next week.
I love that. Are you a processes person that like it's also sometimes easy to get emotional and like you use processes to kind of take the emotion out of it, or like does emotion not necessarily like come into play for you?
It's a good question. I think that one, I believe that every process has a limited shelf life, right? So processes are meant to be broken. and you need to understand why and how and figure out, okay, was it because the process was too difficult? Was it because it didn't fit the use case? And so I think it's one of those things where I want to lay out the ideal state, test it, let people break it and be like, okay, this didn't happen the way I thought it was going to be. Why? And there's like, well, this is super cumbersome. We didn't, okay, let me go fix that piece and then iterate and have a new process that comes back. I think that there's a lot of emotion into the design of the process. I'm one that thinks a lot about incentives and making sure incentive structures are aligned. And so I think very deeply about, if we were to put a process in place, what's the impact this is going to have on the team, on morale? Anything we're doing should be making people's lives better. And so I want to be cognizant of that.
I love that. I love that so much. So powerful. Man, this has been such a fun conversation. And okay, one more question for you is what is the biggest mistake that people typically make in the process creation process? And I'll give you a little bit of context, like just from me personally. Like, so when I first started my agency, I wore all the hats, I did all the things. And when my agency got to a point where it was big, where I needed to hire and get help, one of the hardest things that I experienced was there's so many things that just became nature and almost intuitive in terms of like how I would make decisions to adjust campaigns or A/B test this way or set up a campaign in this way or whatever. And it was really difficult to like get it out in a way that someone else could make decisions in a way that was congruent with how like our brand and how we do things. And so for me, like the longer I do something, the harder it is to create a process, even though like you need to like do something long enough so that there is a process. But I'm curious, like with your experience, like where do people struggle in the process making, and like how do you get those like intuitive decisions out into a process where like you can remove yourself from the business?
Man, that is a great question, and one that I think we're always learning and relearning, and something that nobody's ever quite figured out completely. What works for me is the following framework, though, is I think that most people don't understand what it means to delegate. And so there's a difference between delegating the work and delegating the decision rights. And really what we're talking about when we're building businesses is being able to delegate the decision rights. But in order to do that, there's a couple steps you have to do before then. The first one is you have to write down what it is you want to happen, right? So even as a solo founder, if you're thinking through, okay, here's how I want this to work. Let me put my best efforts down on paper. It's really easy now with ChatGPT, just talk at it and help you create it. But you need to put down your ideal state, because that act itself is going to allow you to make connections and understand what things are going to be. And then you also now have a time capsule where 6 months later you can go back to that and be like, oh yeah, that didn't really work out. Here's where it is now. And so you're kind of leaving breadcrumbs for your future self to come back to. Once you have something written as a framework, then the first step is delegating the work. And usually what people do is they say, hey, I'm going to hire someone really cheap overseas, something like that, who can just, I'm going to write the box for them and give them box, and you go do that. And that works up until a point, because the point becomes, if it's not a commodity idea, which reality an AI agent should do in the next 2 years, then you're going to be spending about as much time as you are answering their questions and training them than if you just did it yourself. And so that's like a really difficult. So the key thing is getting to a point where you can delegate the decision rights. And that usually means that you're going to hire maybe a level higher, more expensive than you were thinking, right? Just to have someone who's there, who's competent, who can think through it. Rather than a junior finance person, hire somebody with a CPA in South America, right? Have something there where you can still be there from a budget point of view, but work through it. But then it's about, all right, we've got my document. Let's talk about what our goals are. Let's make sure we're aligned on where we're going. And then we say, this is your box, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do within the box, but I'm going to be very clear about when you need to check in with me and when you just need to do stuff. And if you could put the effort in up front to getting that going, then suddenly things start to work, and you are that much closer to delegating those decision rights. And because you set up those parameters, those guideposts ahead of time, you don't have to worry about them making a call that will destroy the business, because you've said, hey, you can make these decisions up to $10,000. Anything above $10,000, come to me, right? And so then we kind of talk through it. And so when they make mistakes, they're small, they're teachable moments, as opposed to, hey, I just signed a $2 million contract with this company. It's, we're good for 10 years. You're like, what are you doing?
That's so good. I love that. Yeah, I think just like reflecting on me personally, like I think I need to spend more work in, like you said, like the ultimate like vision and the objective. But I think also like I'm putting pressure on myself that like for a good SOP to exist, like I need to like map out every single step of the process instead of like putting a little bit more trust and onus on the person to like be like get it done, and even passing along that process of documentation to them so that it can be documented, right? I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm gonna apply that in my own business for sure. I really appreciate that.
I think a simple cheat code is rather than you writing the SOP, have a conversation, say, all right, I want you to create the SOP for me. And then they create it, and then you see what their thought process was, and you can critique it, and then you're just going to iterate further. But I think the key thing here is that there are certain things that only a founder can do. And the whole point is that you need to work on only those things and try to push everything else elsewhere. And sometimes you can't do it because of a cost point of view. And so you need to hold on to those burdens a little bit longer. But your objective should be to say, like, look, if dealing with payroll is something that's not core to where we want to go, it's important. Let me find somebody else to handle payroll. I now free up that mental space to go think more about content or, do BD work or other things that are out there.
Yeah, I love that. So good. So good. Well, Aaron, this has been like packed with tons of value, and I love your perspective and your passion that you bring to the work, and just your natural analytic abilities that are making a big difference in the company's lives that you're working with. And I know it'll make a difference for the listeners that are tuning in. So thank you so much for coming on to the Marketing Matrix.
This was great. Thank you so much for having me.
So one quick thing, how do people get in touch with you or follow your journey or understand more about what you do? What's the best way for people to follow you?
I've got a pretty unique name, so LinkedIn is probably the best way. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I've got the newsletter, I've got podcasts that we mentioned at the beginning, e-commerce on tap, and build a business with buying. But yeah, reach out. And I joke that I'm not a very good consultant because I always give too much away for free. But I'm more than happy if people have questions or like, hey, what do I do here? I'll give you 15, 30 minutes. Like, let's just talk through it. And if I can be helpful, I want to.
I love that. So good. All right. Well, I'm going to put the links to his profile in the episode notes. And there might be a few other links there. So guys, make sure to check that out and leverage his skill set and all the resources that he's putting online. So again, thank you so much for coming on the Marketing Matrix, and can't wait to talk again soon.